What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved stars sits down for what should be a friendly morning chat, only to be met with disrespect, condescension, and a shocking personal attack that crosses every line imaginable? In just 36 seconds, a television host's career credibility crumbles as Harrison Ford does something he has never done in over 4 decades of interviews. He walks off, and what led to that moment will leave you stunned. The morning started like any other on the Lorraine Kelly show. The set was bright, the audience was ready, and Harrison Ford was scheduled to talk about his latest film. He walked onto the stage with that familiar, modest smile, the one that has charmed audiences since the 1970s. He waved to the crowd, sat down in the guest chair, and prepared for what he thought would be a straightforward conversation about his work. Lorraine Kelly greeted him with a big smile, but something felt off from the very beginning. There was an edge to her voice, a strange energy that Harrison seemed to notice immediately. He settled into his seat, polite as ever, and waited for the first question. "So, Harrison," Lorraine began, leaning forward with an exaggerated enthusiasm, "you are here to talk about your new movie, but I have to say, and I think everyone is wondering this, are you not getting a bit old for all this action stuff?" The audience went quiet. It was a bold opening, far more personal than the usual softball questions guests get on morning television. Harrison paused, his expression shifting just slightly. He had been asked about his age before. It came with the territory, but there was something about the way she said it that felt less like curiosity and more like a jab. "Well," Harrison said calmly, choosing his words carefully, "I do not think age has much to do with it. If you can do the work and tell the story, that is what matters." It was a measured response, diplomatic even. But Lorraine was not satisfied. She let out a laugh, the kind that does not quite reach the eyes, and pressed on. "But come on," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "You are not a young man anymore. Do you not think it is time to let the younger actors take over? I mean, how much longer can you really keep doing this?" Harrison's jaw tightened. He was still composed, but anyone watching could see the shift. This was not a conversation about his movie anymore. This was something else entirely. "I think," Harrison said slowly, "that is a question you could ask any actor at any age. The work speaks for itself." He was giving her an out, a chance to pivot back to the actual reason he was there. But Lorraine did not take it. Instead, she leaned back in her chair with a smirk and looked at the audience as if inviting them to share in some private joke. "I suppose," she said, turning back to him. "But there is a difference between doing the work and clinging to it because you cannot let go of your glory days, is there not?" The air in the studio changed. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Even the crew behind the camera seemed to tense up. Harrison Ford, a man known for his professionalism and restraint, stared at her for a long moment. His expression was unreadable, but the silence spoke volumes. "I am not sure I understand what you are getting at," Harrison said finally, his voice calm but firm. Lorraine shrugged, that same dismissive gesture. "I am just saying, we have all seen actors who do not know when to step aside. It becomes a bit sad, does it not, watching someone try to relive their youth on screen, when everyone can see they are past their prime." It was a staggering thing to say. This was not journalism. This was not even provocative interviewing. This was personal, mean, spirited, and completely uncalled for. Harrison took a slow breath, his hands resting on the arms of his chair. He was still trying to keep his composure, still trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. "Lorraine," he said quietly, "I came here to talk about the film. If you want to have a conversation about the work, I am happy to do that, but I am not interested in this." For a moment, it seemed like she might back down, but instead, Lorraine doubled down. She leaned forward again, her voice taking on a patronizing tone. "Oh, do not be so sensitive," she said with a laugh. "I am just having a bit of fun. You can take a joke, cannot you? Or has Hollywood made you too precious for that?" Harrison did not respond immediately. He looked at her, really looked at her, and something in his expression changed. It was as if he had made a decision in that moment. He was done. "You know what?" Harrison said, his voice steady but laced with restrained frustration. "I have done thousands of interviews in my career. I have sat through difficult questions, awkward moments, and everything in between. But I have never sat through someone being disrespectful just for the sake of it." Lorraine's smile faltered, but only for a second. She tried to laugh it off, waving her hand again. "Oh, come on now. I am not being disrespectful. I am just being honest." "Honest?" Harrison repeated, and for the first time, there was real heat in his voice. "You invited me here to promote a film, and instead, you have spent the last few minutes insulting me. That is not honesty. That is just rude." The audience was completely silent now. Every eye was on the two of them. Lorraine seemed to realize she had pushed too far, but instead of apologizing, she tried to regain control of the situation with deflection. "I think you are overreacting," she said, her tone turning defensive. "I ask tough questions. That is my job. If you cannot handle that, maybe you should not be doing interviews." It was the wrong thing to say. Harrison stood up, not in a dramatic, angry way, but with the quiet certainty of someone who had reached their limit. He looked at her one last time, and when he spoke, his voice was calm but absolutely final. "I have handled plenty of tough questions in my life," Harrison said. "But there is a difference between tough questions and being needlessly cruel. I am not going to sit here and be disrespected. Good luck with your show." And then he walked off, just like that. He did not storm off or slam anything or make a scene. He simply unclipped his microphone, handed it to a nearby crew member, and walked off the stage. The audience sat in stunned silence. Lorraine sat frozen in her chair, her mouth slightly open, clearly not expecting that outcome. For a few seconds, nobody moved. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every excruciating moment of the fallout. Lorraine tried to recover, forcing a laugh and looking at the audience as if to say, "Can you believe that?" But nobody laughed with her. The atmosphere was too tense, too uncomfortable. "Well," Lorraine said, her voice a bit shaky now, "I suppose some people just cannot take a bit of banter, can they?" But it was too late. The damage was done. She tried to move on, to introduce the next segment, but the energy in the room was gone. Everyone knew what had just happened. One of the most respected actors in the world had walked off her show, and it was entirely her fault. What made the whole thing even more striking was how Harrison handled it. He did not yell. He did not insult her back. He did not make a big dramatic exit. He simply stood up for himself and left. It was a masterclass in dignity, in knowing your worth and refusing to accept treatment that fell below it. The contrast between the two could not have been sharper. On one side, you had Harrison Ford, a man with a career spanning 5 decades, a body of work that includes some of the most iconic films ever made, and a reputation for professionalism and humility. On the other side, you had a host who thought she could score points by tearing him down, by making him the butt of her jokes, by treating him like he was lucky to be there. But here is the thing about respect. You cannot demand it, you cannot fake it, and you certainly cannot treat someone poorly and then act surprised when they refuse to tolerate it. Lorraine seemed to operate under the assumption that her platform gave her the right to say whatever she wanted, to whomever she wanted, without consequence. She was wrong. The interview, or what little of it there was, revealed something important about the nature of media and celebrity. Just because someone agrees to come on your show does not mean they have signed up to be insulted. Just because someone is famous does not mean they forfeit their right to basic human decency. And just because you have a microphone does not mean you should use it to belittle people. Harrison had come to the show in good faith. He was there to do his job, to talk about his film, to engage with the audience. He was not there to be a punching bag, and when it became clear that Lorraine had no interest in a genuine conversation, he made the only choice that made sense. He left. What is fascinating is how Lorraine responded to his very reasonable objections. Instead of taking a step back and recognizing that she had gone too far, she accused him of overreacting. She tried to frame his legitimate grievance as him being too sensitive, too precious, unable to take a joke. It is a classic deflection tactic, one that puts the blame back on the victim instead of acknowledging the harm caused. But the audience was not buying it. Neither was anyone watching at home, because the truth was right there on screen for everyone to see. This was not a case of a guest being overly sensitive. This was a case of a host being unnecessarily cruel and then being shocked when someone called her out on it. The moment when Harrison stood up was powerful, precisely because it was so understated. There was no grand speech, no dramatic confrontation, just a simple statement of fact. "I'm not going to sit here and be disrespected." And then he left. It takes real confidence to do that, to walk away from a situation that is not serving you, especially when cameras are rolling and an audience is watching. In that moment, Harrison reminded everyone watching what self-respect looks like. It is not loud or aggressive. It is not about making a scene or trying to embarrass the other person. It is simply about knowing your worth and refusing to compromise it for anyone, regardless of the circumstances. Lorraine, on the other hand, revealed her own insecurities. The way she kept pushing, kept needling, kept trying to get a rise out of him, suggested someone who was more interested in creating conflict than conducting an interview. Maybe she thought it would make for good television. Maybe she thought it would make her look tough or edgy. Whatever her reasoning, it backfired spectacularly, because at the end of the day, people remember how you make them feel. And what Lorraine made people feel in that moment was uncomfortable, embarrassed for her, and deeply sympathetic toward Harrison. She had every advantage going into that interview. She was on her home turf, she had the support of her production team, she had an audience on her side, and she squandered all of it by choosing cruelty over kindness, ego over empathy. The whole situation raises an important question about the role of interviewers. What is the goal? Is it to illuminate, to entertain, to inform, or is it to dominate, to control, to diminish? The best interviewers make their guests feel comfortable enough to open up, to share insights and stories that viewers would not otherwise hear. They create a space where genuine conversation can happen. Lorraine did the opposite. She created a hostile environment where her guest felt attacked and disrespected. And the result was entirely predictable. He left. Not because he could not handle tough questions, but because there is a difference between tough questions and personal attacks. Think about the questions she asked. Are you not getting a bit old for all this action stuff? That is not a tough question. That is ageism dressed up as journalism. Do you not think it is time to let the younger actors take over? Again, not tough. Just insulting. Watching someone try to relive their youth on screen when everyone can see they are past their prime. That is not even a question. That is just mean. And when Harrison tried to redirect the conversation, tried to bring it back to the actual reason he was there, Lorraine accused him of being sensitive. She mocked him for not being able to take a joke. But here is the thing about jokes. They are supposed to be funny. They are supposed to bring people together, to create a moment of shared laughter. What Lorraine was doing was not joking. It was bullying. The power dynamic in that situation is worth examining too. Lorraine had all the institutional power. It was her show, her set, her crew. She controlled the questions, the pace, the direction of the conversation. Harrison was essentially there at her invitation, as a guest, expected to play along with whatever she had planned. But despite that power imbalance, Harrison still had one crucial form of power, the power to leave. And he used it, brilliantly. By standing up and walking off, he reclaimed his agency in a situation where he was being treated poorly. He showed that no amount of fame, no platform, no audience gives anyone the right to disrespect another human being. It was a powerful statement, made all the more powerful by how calmly and deliberately he made it. The fact that Lorraine could not seem to understand why he was upset is telling. Her reaction, both in the moment and afterward, suggested someone who genuinely believed she had done nothing wrong. She seemed baffled that Harrison would take offense to her comments, as if her intent somehow negated the impact of her words. But that is not how communication works. Intent matters, sure, but impact matters more. You can say you were just joking all you want, but if the other person feels hurt, dismissed, or disrespected, then your joke failed. And the appropriate response is not to double down and insist they are overreacting. The appropriate response is to listen, to acknowledge their feelings, and to do better. Lorraine did none of those things. Instead, she tried to gaslight Harrison and the audience into thinking he was the problem. You are overreacting. You cannot take a joke. Some people just cannot handle banter. These are all statements designed to shift blame, to make the person who has been hurt feel like they are at fault for being hurt. It is manipulative, and it did not work, because everyone watching could see the truth. They could see a kind, professional man being subjected to unprovoked rudeness. They could see him trying, multiple times, to steer the conversation back to neutral ground. And they could see a host who was more interested in scoring points than conducting a meaningful interview. The walk-off itself was a moment of clarity. In an industry where people are often expected to smile through discomfort, to play nice, even when they are being mistreated, Harrison chose authenticity. He chose to honor his own boundaries, and in doing so, he gave permission to everyone watching to do the same in their own lives. How many times have you sat through a conversation where someone was being rude or dismissive, and you stayed because you did not want to make a scene? How many times have you tolerated poor treatment because walking away felt too dramatic, too difficult, too risky? Harrison showed that sometimes walking away is exactly the right move, not as an act of aggression, but as an act of self-respect. The aftermath of the walk-off was equally revealing. As Harrison left the stage, Lorraine sat there looking stunned, then tried to play it off with a nervous laugh and a dismissive comment. But you could see in her face that she knew she had messed up. The audience was not laughing with her. The energy in the room was all wrong. She had lost control of the situation, and she knew it. What is remarkable is that even in his exit, Harrison maintained his composure. He did not throw his microphone. He did not point fingers or shout accusations. He simply stated his boundary: "I am not going to sit here and be disrespected," and followed through. It was the behavior of someone who has nothing to prove, someone secure enough in himself to walk away from a bad situation without needing to burn it down on the way out. This stands in sharp contrast to Lorraine's behavior throughout. Every comment she made, every dismissive gesture, every attempt to laugh off his legitimate concerns spoke to someone who was deeply insecure. Why else would you feel the need to tear down someone like Harrison Ford? What do you gain from making a guest feel small? The answer, unfortunately, is attention. Conflict generates attention. Drama generates attention. And in a media landscape that increasingly rewards controversy over substance, there is a perverse incentive to push buttons, to cross lines, to see how far you can go before someone pushes back. Lorraine pushed too far, and she found out. But here is what she did not count on. People still care about decency. They still care about respect. They still recognize cruelty when they see it, even when it is dressed up as entertainment. And they still admire people who have the courage to stand up for themselves, even when it is uncomfortable. Harrison Ford did not need to walk off that show. He could have sat there and endured it. He could have given short answers and waited for the interview to end. He could have played along with Lorraine's game, laughed at her jokes, pretended everything was fine. But he did not. And that choice mattered. It mattered because it showed that some things are more important than publicity. Some things are more important than playing nice for the cameras. Your dignity is one of those things. Your self-respect is one of those things. And Harrison was not willing to trade those things for anything, not even a few minutes of airtime to promote his film. The whole situation also highlights the importance of preparation and professionalism in interviews. A good interviewer does their homework. They know their guests' work. They understand their boundaries. They come prepared with thoughtful questions that will engage both the guest and the audience. Lorraine did none of that. Instead, she seemed to think that being provocative was the same as being interesting, that making someone uncomfortable was the same as making good television. But there is a reason why the best interviewers, the ones people remember and respect, are the ones who create safe spaces for their guests. Because that is when real conversations happen. That is when people open up and share things that matter. By choosing hostility over hospitality, Lorraine ensured that no real conversation would take place. She shut down any possibility of genuine connection or insight. All she accomplished was alienating her guest and making herself look bad in the process. And make no mistake, she did look bad. Not because Harrison walked off, but because of how she behaved leading up to that moment. Every snide comment, every dismissive laugh, every attempt to minimize his concerns, all of it painted a picture of someone who did not respect her guest, did not respect her audience, and did not respect the craft of interviewing itself. The incident serves as a reminder that respect is not optional in human interactions. It is the foundation upon which everything else is built. Without respect, there can be no trust. Without trust, there can be no meaningful communication. And without meaningful communication, what is the point of the interview in the first place? Harrison understood this. He came ready to communicate, ready to share, ready to engage. But he was not willing to do so in an environment of disrespect. And that boundary, that line in the sand, is something everyone should have. The beauty of his response was in its simplicity. He did not need to explain himself at length. He did not need to justify his feelings or defend his decision. He simply stated what was happening. I am not going to sit here and be disrespected, and acted accordingly. It was clear, direct, and impossible to misinterpret. Lorraine, even in the face of that clarity, still tried to twist the narrative. She tried to make it about him being too sensitive, about him not being able to handle her interview style, about him overreacting. But none of that stuck because everyone had just watched what happened. They had seen her attack him repeatedly. They had seen him try to redirect. They had seen her dismiss his attempts, and they had seen him calmly choose to leave. The truth was right there on screen, undeniable and clear. No amount of spin could change what people had witnessed with their own eyes. What makes this moment so powerful is that it is not just about Harrison Ford or Lorraine Kelly. It is about a larger principle. It is about the right to be treated with dignity. It is about the importance of setting boundaries. It is about the courage it takes to walk away from situations that do not serve you. even when walking away comes with consequences. Harrison knew that walking off would create a moment. He knew it would be talked about. He knew it might be seen as controversial. But he also knew that staying would mean accepting treatment he did not deserve. And when forced to choose between those two options, he chose himself. He chose his dignity. And in doing so, he reminded everyone watching that they have that choice too. The interview that never was became a lesson in self-respect. It became a masterclass in boundaries. It became proof that you do not have to tolerate poor treatment, no matter who is dishing it out or what platform they have. You can simply stand up, state your truth, and walk away. And sometimes, that is the most powerful thing you can do.